Hello, and welcome back to another Sunday School lesson. We're in 2 Nephi 11 through 25, titled We Rejoice in Christ, and we're going to start with a leap of faith. Which, always such a great metaphor, and I think it's very appropriate when we're dealing with Isaiah that we have to kind of take a leap of faith in coming to know and to understand Isaiah. So, the first thing I wanted to start with outside the lesson, some of you might remember or know of in the 70s, possibly in the 60s, they had this these booklets. Maybe they were full-size book anyway, especially for Mormons, and they told inspirational stories and things that had happened to people that helped inspire people. Well, in the I can't even remember when this came out, but there was a spoof of it published called Especially for Everybody, and it kind of spoofed and, you know, in a fun, respectful way, it spoofed these inspirational stories. And my uncle actually was one of the writers for that, so that's kind of a cool thing for me to remember. But one of the inspirational stories that they spoofed was one that you may be aware of. It was a young man in Vietnam, and in his chest, in his pocket, I believe his chest pocket, he had an extra clip, and behind the extra clip, a Book of Mormon, and he was shot. He was shot by a sniper there. The bullet went all the way through the clip and stopped in the Book of Mormon, and it literally saved his life. It was a miracle. The bullet should have gone all the way through, and it didn't. So in the spoof part, in the spoof of it, they actually kept the story exactly the same. But the ending has this young man writing home to his mother, and basically saying that the bullet stopped in midway through 2 Nephi. And the response his mother gave was, "Oh, honey, I'm so glad you're safe, but I'm not all that surprised that the bullet stopped there. I could never get through the Isaiah sections either." And that's... Why I bring this up is because that's such a relatable moment for, I think, most people who have read through the Book of Mormon. This is the third section in the Book of Mormon that records what Isaiah wrote. Nephi did it 3 times. First time, I believe, in 1 Nephi. Second time was when he was recording Jacob's words, when Nephi had Jacob read the words of Isaiah to his people. And now, finally, just a huge segment of the Book of Mormon taken up with, yet again, more Isaiah. So, one of the things that Nephi taught was that Isaiah's words are plain unto all those that are filled with the spirit of prophecy. And as somebody pointed out when I was younger, Nephi, of course Nephi called it plain. He was a prophet. He had a greater understanding than we do. And Isaiah is really tough to kind of understand, because it's, written in a time and a culture that we don't have. A lot of it is largely symbolic, with multiple meanings possible for a good chunk of it. So, we have, the cultural differences, which are hard enough to figure out. We have, just basically the symbolism and the symbolic meanings. Plus, we have, it's just hugely complex. We'll just leave it there. Hugely complex and hard to understand and read. But, it is worth reading, and that's kind of why I started with the leap of faith. Because, you see, what the thing about it is not that we understand it completely the first time we read it, or even the 100th time we read it. It's that we have faith in God, and we keep coming back and reading it and praying for more understanding and more knowledge as we learn more about, learn and grow, basically. We get more knowledge, and just keep going back to Isaiah, keep praying to understand the meaning behind it, and really do what we can to figure out the meaning behind it. Read what other people have said, what other people have done, and eventually we will have a greater understanding of Isaiah. I do dare say that unless we become a prophet ourselves, we probably won't have as good of understanding of Isaiah as Nephi did. but that shouldn't stop us from learning and growing and trying to figure it out. So, yep, that's my big lecture for the day. So let me go over the lesson. So the first one is, ironically titled, How Can I Better Understand the Teachings of Isaiah? Like I said, I started with that one, but this is Nephi's advice to us. The first one is, liken the words of Isaiah unto ourselves. And I think this is true about pretty much all scriptures, that we should liken it to ourselves. You know, if say, in moments where Christ is giving instructions to his disciples, and, you know, he refers to them by name, replace their name with our own name and see if we can apply that instruction into our lives, and so on and so forth. Now, with Isaiah, you know, it's a little bit more difficult to understand how it can apply to our lives, and that's why I said keep going back over it. Keep finding the meaning in there. And the symbolism and so on could have a very specific meaning for you at a specific time, reflecting what's going on in your life. If you are open to, you know, the Spirit will guide you, and you'll have that understanding for that moment. And that's how we liken it to ourselves, basically. And like I think I've said this before in lessons, it's not going to be easy. Nothing the Lord asks you to do is easy, but it is ultimately worth it. So, you know, it's like getting trophies in these video games. Most of them are, you know, pretty difficult, but ultimately it's worth it to say, I did it. I made it to that level. I accomplished that. It's like that, only more so. We get far more... I get far more benefit from the scriptures than for all the trophies I've gotten for, say, this game that we're playing right now. And that's how it works. And so the second part is I've kind of covered this, but it's the second thing that Nephi suggests we do is seek to be filled with the spirit of prophecy. Like I said, listen to the Spirit as we do it, but also seek to be filled with this spirit, this prophecy. You know, seek to essentially... I'm not going to say to be a prophet, but to go along, follow the same guidelines, the same route that prophets before have followed, as you seek to understand Isaiah, and that then the spirit of prophecy will be in you when it comes to interpreting the words of Isaiah, and especially when it comes to interpreting the words of Isaiah for yourself, and for your family, and for whomever else you seek this knowledge on behalf of. And yeah, pretty much those are the two pieces of advice from Nephi on understanding Isaiah, and he should know. He was the guy who actually understood Isaiah. So let's move on. So one of the things that come out about it, and this is important, pretty much all of the Isaiah chapters that are quoted here are in some way in reference to Christ, his life, his sacrifice, all that stuff is what Isaiah is talking about in these verses quoted by Nephi. And I think that's one of the most significant things about the scriptures. And let me see. Nephi's desire in this, I'm going to read this kind of directly because it is kind of an important thing. His desire was to persuade his children to believe in Christ and to be reconciled to God. And so that's what the entire Book of Mormon is all about. It's believing in Christ, it's being reconciled with God through your belief in Christ. And you start by believing in Christ, believing in his sacrifice, and from there on you develop faith, you develop a testimony of these things. And that's what all of the Isaiah things, for all they're hard to understand, that's what they're all about, developing a testimony in Christ and persuading yourself and others to come to Christ. That's what all the scriptures are about, really. And that is the path that you should pursue. So we'll move on. So the next part about it is about humility. Now, the proud and worldly will be humbled is the title of this part, and it is an interesting point that the lesson makes is that Nephi had previously been shown in a vision the destruction of his descendants, of his people. And so, as a result, he put more focus in his teachings upon pride and how pride will destroy people. And, you know, he'd not only seen the vision of it, he'd seen how pride destroyed his brothers and made his brothers, not just once, but time after time, try and kill him. And it is one of the most important lessons to remember is don't get caught up in the pride of your own heart. If, you know, there are many people in this world who have talents, who have worked hard and developed their talents. And because of their pride, they believe they are more wise, more knowledgeable than other people because of this. And, you know, we see this a lot in the world nowadays. And we should be humble with the knowledge we have, with what we have been given. It's all a gift from God. And however much we've worked to develop it, it's still a gift from God. We may have worked it and made it better than what it initially was, but it's still, like all good things, it comes from God. And then what we do with it, you know, will determine the type of person we are. There are so many people out there who, like I said, have accomplished quite a bit. And their pride leads them to arrogance, leads them to believe they are superior to other people. And in fact, we look at them not praiseworthy for all the good, for, you know, their talent that they've shown and expressed, but we look at them, you know, for the horrible things that their arrogance has allowed them to become. And, you know, it's something we should just ask ourselves. Will my children, will people who love me remember me for the good I have done in the world, or will they remember me as, you know, an arrogant jerk? And yeah, pride is the root of all of that. So beware of pride, beware of kind of building ourselves up to be arrogant, to be better than everyone else. And that's the thing. One way or another, whether it's in this life or in the next, the prideful will be humbled by the Lord, by God. You know, I knew a guy once. He was, you know, he was a nice enough guy. He was Catholic. And this was around the time there was a lot of controversy about child molestation among the priests, among Catholic priests, and so on. There was a lot of news in that. And he said to me, you know what I'm going to do when I die, and you know, I come before God, and he asked me to confess my sins, I'm going to say, you first. And my response to that was to tell him that I really would like to be there and see it when that happens. Because God will, you know, for however much that my friend had right on his side, and yeah, he was right. The things that had been done by people who were supposedly in the service of God, you know, he had a right to be upset about that. He had a right to be angry about the sins that these people had done, the harm and hurt they had caused. But then he went around believing that in his arrogance that he was now superior to God in his morality, because people who were supposed to represent God represented their own interests instead. And that sort of arrogance only leads to a downfall. And any one of us can be subject to that if we grow strong in the pride of our hearts. In the early church history, Oliver Cowdery was a great member of the church. He did so much good. And then, in his arrogance, he left the church because he had come to believe that the church could not be restored, that the truth of God's gospel could not go forward without him involved in it. And so he left it, and the church thrived after he left. It was difficult for the church, but it was difficult for the church before he left. It was difficult after he left, but the church still thrived. Because the church is not just one person, it's God's church. And its people. And if we become arrogant, if we think that we are so important that things can't get done without us, that's when we fall to pride and we become, we become arrogant, we become sinful, basically. And we will be humbled by that. If not, like I said, if not in this life, in the next life, we will be humbled. And it's a hard journey. It's very hard going from a person who knows everything to someone who realizes that he never knew anything at all. And that's a journey that people go through, from pride to humility. So, thus Nephi's warning, thus Isaiah's warning that he quotes in this: beware of pride, because it's never going to lead you into a good place. So let's continue on. Next segment is says, in the millennium, God's people will enjoy peace. Now, that actually, doesn't that sound good to everyone? I mean, we look at the world, we look at how chaotic the world is, how so many things that are supposed to be good just end up being crass and crude and so on, how so many good things can be perverted into becoming just bad things. In recently, this is kind of a geek culture thing, but many of the recent modern adaptations of classic series, classic things, Star Trek and Doctor Who come to mind immediately in my head, have become so focused on telling a message or spreading some sort of message that no matter how good the message is, it stopped focusing on what made these shows great to begin with, which was just good characters, good storyline. And that's what classic fans of these series really want from the new versions of the series and aren't getting. And it feels like this is, this sort of a corruption of classic things is becoming more and more apparent, not just in entertainment, but in pretty much every single thing. That oftentimes we will hold these things to be very dear, very innocent, very sweet, and then they will become corrupted and tainted with as the world goes the way of the world. And it's just, yeah, it gets very tiring to kind of have to deal with that, to deal with this corruption that seems to seep in everywhere. And so, yes, a restful millennium sounds great. It sounds great, and it will come, and we will finally receive rest from the world. We will be able to enjoy the simple and the innocent and just the great things of the world without this constant corruption going through and just ruining everything. And it's just such a great blessing, the idea that we will enjoy peace. And not just peace from war, peace instead of war, but peace of spirit, of mind, of just everything. And it sounds so nice and so relaxing, but until that time comes, yeah, we have to get up, we have to be in the world, but not of the world. And that can be very difficult to do. Which is why, read scriptures daily. Pray to God, be humble, and just have faith. Just, jump off that building and land in the leaf pile. Take that leap of faith and we will find peace and happiness. And you know, I'm going to leave the lesson on that idea because I think it's a good ending point. I'll get into a good position. We can see Buckingham Palace there. Anyway, that was the lesson. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.